The first time the human touched the alien princess, she called it an insult. She stood tall, wrapped in her silver royal cloak, glowing faintly under the blue lights of the galactic court. Her eyes were sharp like crystal shards, her expression cold and distant. Her name was Princess Lyra of the Valyri Empire, a powerful race known for their beauty, pride, and strict traditions. She was respected across the galaxy, feared by enemies, and obeyed by her own people without question. No one touched the royal skin of a Valyri princess. No one dared. But the human didn't know this. His name was Orion Hale, a soldier from Earth who worked as a peacekeeper between alien territories. He wasn't dressed in royal colors or glowing armor, like the Valyri guards. He wore a simple black uniform and carried a calm expression that made him look almost harmless. But he wasn't harmless. He had survived wars, storms, and missions that most refused. And now he was assigned to escort the princess during her diplomatic visit. The moment they met, he tried to offer a handshake, thinking it was a polite gesture. But when his fingers lightly touched her hand, she froze. Her eyes widened, the room gasped, and her guards instantly stepped forward with their weapons half raised. Lyra pulled her hand back as if burned. She stared at him with disbelief and anger. "You dare touch me?" she whispered sharply. Orion quickly lowered his hand. "I apologize. It's a greeting on my planet. To touch a princess without permission is an insult to my entire bloodline," she replied, her voice trembling not with fear but with a deep emotional wound that no one else seemed to understand. Orion stepped back and bowed slightly. "I didn't mean to disrespect you." Her gaze softened for only a second, just enough to show she wasn't heartless. But she turned away without another word, her guards forming a protective wall around her as she walked deeper into the station. Orion followed behind the group, feeling confused. He had worked with dozens of alien species. Some were strict, some were unpredictable. But none reacted like this. He wondered why such a simple touch would upset her so much. He had no idea that the princess carried secrets that even her own people didn't speak about. Secrets that made physical contact painful for her heart, not her skin. As the day continued, Orion noticed things about Lyra. She looked strong, but her movements were careful, almost lonely. She didn't laugh, didn't smile, didn't relax. She kept everyone at least 3 steps away, even her own guards. When someone walked too close, her shoulders stiffened. When a servant accidentally brushed her sleeve, she flinched slightly before hiding it with a cold expression. It wasn't anger. It was fear, mixed with sadness. Orion wasn't sure why he noticed. Maybe because humans were good at reading emotions. Maybe because he had seen soldiers break under pressure and recognized the same emptiness in her eyes. Or maybe because something about her felt strangely fragile behind all the royal power. Later, they boarded a small transport ship that would take them through a glowing nebula toward the Valyri capital. Lyra sat far away from everyone, looking out the window. She didn't talk, she barely breathed. Her guards whispered among themselves but did not disturb her. Orion took a quiet seat behind her, thinking he should avoid any more mistakes. But the silence felt heavy, like she was trapped inside her own thoughts. He wondered if she was angry at him, or simply used to being alone. When the ship passed through the colorful nebula clouds, the entire cabin glowed with pink and blue lights. Even Lyra looked softer, her silver hair reflecting the colors like glass threads. Orion watched her for a moment, then looked away quickly, not wanting to seem rude. The journey was supposed to be peaceful. But halfway through, alarms suddenly rang. The lights flickered, the ship shook violently, and the pilot shouted that an unidentified object was approaching fast. Before anyone could react, a blast struck the ship's side, the cabin tilted, people stumbled, and the guards rushed to shield the princess. Orion grabbed a support bar and steadied himself. "Who's attacking us?" The pilot yelled. "Signal unknown." "But they're locking onto the princess." Another explosion sent sparks across the room. Lyra gasped as her throne-like seat detached and slid toward the open side of the cabin. Wind rushed in, pulling debris and loose objects into space. Lyra held onto the edge, her cloak whipping violently in the vacuum pull. Her guards struggled to reach her, but the floor had tilted too far. Orion didn't think. He only moved. He pushed past the shaking floor, grabbed a safety line, and leaped toward her. The moment he reached her, he wrapped an arm around her waist and pulled her close, anchoring the cable onto a metal bar. Lyra was trembling, gripping his uniform tightly as the wind howled around them. Their faces were inches apart. Her eyes were wide with fear, not anger. "You touched me again," she whispered, her voice fragile, lost. "I'm trying to save you," he shouted over the alarms. For the first time, she didn't push him away. She didn't insult him. She didn't freeze in cold anger. Instead, she clung to him like someone who had been alone for too long and didn't know how to ask for help. He pulled them both to safety as the pilot sealed the cabin door and shut the breach. The ship steadied, but Lyra didn't release him immediately. Her breathing was fast, her cheeks pale. He looked at her gently. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head slowly, still holding onto his chest as if afraid he might disappear. Her guards rushed forward, but she raised her hand weakly to stop them. They froze, confused. Lyra never allowed anyone to touch her. Yet she was allowing him no. She was depending on him. Orion helped her stand. "You're safe now." She took a slow breath, her voice softer than he had ever heard. "Why? Why would a human risk himself for me?" "Because you're a person," he said simply. "Because you were falling. And because I couldn't let you go." Her eyes shined with something unfamiliar warmth. Lyra stared at him as if seeing him for the first time. Not as a mistake or an insult. Not as a disrespectful human. But as someone who had reached through a barrier she thought no one could cross. She pulled her hand away from his uniform slowly, looking at her fingers as if confused. "Your touch. It didn't hurt this time." He didn't understand what she meant, but he smiled gently. "Good. That means we're making progress." She looked away quickly, embarrassed. "Do not make this sound simple. I have never allowed anyone to touch me. Not even my own people." "Why?" Her throat tightened, her voice dropping lower. "Because every touch reminds me of a moment I wish to forget." He didn't push. He didn't force her to explain. He only nodded with a calm understanding that seemed to soften her more than she expected. The ship finally landed safely on a nearby outpost for emergency repairs. Lyra stepped out slowly, her cloak flowing behind her. The guards surrounded her again, but she kept glancing back at him. She tried to appear cold, but her eyes betrayed her. She remembered the warmth of his arm around her, the security in his grip, the way her heart didn't break this time. His touch didn't insult her now, it saved her. Orion noticed her gaze. He didn't step closer, but he offered a reassuring nod. She didn't return it, but her eyes lingered for a moment longer than expected. For the first time in years, the alien princess felt a small crack in the wall she had built around her soul. And the strange human she had almost punished hours earlier was the one who made it happen. And deep inside, she wondered why her heart reacted to him like this. She didn't know the answer yet, but it was only the beginning. The emergency outpost where the ship landed was small, quiet, and far from the Valyri capital. Metal walls hummed with old machinery, and the air smelled faintly of electricity. Lyra stepped inside with her guards, her steps elegant but noticeably slower than usual. She still felt shaken from the attack, though she would never admit it out loud. She tried to keep her face calm, but her fingers kept trembling under her long sleeves. She told herself it was because of the danger, the unexpected explosion, the near vacuum exposure. But part of her knew the truth. Her heart wasn't trembling because of the danger. It was trembling because a human had touched her again, and she hadn't recoiled. She had held on to him. She had depended on him. She had let him hold her in a way she had avoided her entire life. And worse, she remembered the warmth of his hands even now, hours later. Orion walked a few steps behind her as they entered the station's resting hall. He didn't approach her or try to speak first. He understood she needed space. But he watched her closely in case she needed help again. The outpost officers offered rooms, food, and medical support. Lyra refused medical attention immediately, even though she was clearly exhausted. The guards argued quietly among themselves, but none dared force her. Orion approached them calmly. She should rest. The shock from the breach was intense. However, the guards glared at him with suspicion. Some still believed he had disrespected her by touching her earlier. But Lyra surprised them all with a single sentence. "He is correct." Everyone fell silent. Lyra looked straight at Orion without anger this time. It was not warmth either. More like a fragile respect she was trying to understand. Orion nodded. "Then let me escort you to a safe room." Her chief guard cleared his throat. "Princess, protocol says." "Protocol does not rescue anyone from an airlock breach," Lyra said softly, but firmly. "He did." The guard fell silent. Orion walked with her down a quiet hallway. She kept some distance, but not as much as before. He walked slowly, so she didn't feel pressured. At one point, the hallway lights flickered, casting a soft blue glow over her face. She looked unusually young in that light. Tired. Lonely. But no longer hiding behind cold dignity. When they reached her temporary quarters, she turned toward him, her silver hair falling gently over her shoulders. "I wish to speak," she said suddenly. Orion paused, surprised. "Of course." She stepped inside the room, and he followed only when she gave a slight nod. It was the first invitation she had ever given him. The room was simple, with a single round window showing the endless stars. Lyra sat at the edge of the bed, her cloak removed, revealing a softer side of her appearance. Orion remained standing near the door, giving her space, but she looked up at him with tired eyes. "You must be wondering," she began quietly, "why my reaction to your touch was so strong." "I figured it must be important to your people," Orion said, keeping his voice gentle. "It is," she replied, "but for me, it is something deeper." She took a long breath, and for the first time, he saw fear in her expression, not fear of danger, but fear of opening her heart. "When I was younger," she said slowly, "I trusted someone. A tutor assigned to train me in diplomacy. He pretended to care for my well-being, pretended to see me as a child who needed guidance, but he used that trust to control me, to manipulate me, to make me feel weak whenever I reached for help." Her voice grew softer. "He would touch my arm or shoulder and say it was correction or discipline, but every time he did, it felt like my strength was being stolen." Her eyes tightened. "I learned to fear touch, to hate it, to flinch away from anyone who came near. And gradually, I accepted the belief that my body was never safe with others." Orion felt his heart sink. He didn't interrupt her. "I hid it," she continued. "No one knows. My people believe I refuse touch because of royal pride. But the truth is far more painful. Every time someone reaches for me, I feel that same old fear." She placed a hand over her chest. "Yet today, when you held me, the fear was gone. I do not understand it." Orion stepped closer but slowly, making sure she saw every movement. He didn't reach for her. "You were in danger," he said softly. "I wasn't thinking about rules. I was only thinking about helping you live." "I know," she whispered. "And I would never hurt you," he added. Her eyes warmed slightly at those words, and he saw a glimmer of calm settle over her shoulders. She looked down at her hands, remembering how they had gripped his uniform earlier. "I felt safe," she admitted in a quiet, almost trembling voice. "For the first time in years, I felt safe in someone's arms." Orion felt something tighten in his chest. Not romantic desire, something deeper, protective, gentle. He didn't touch her, but he lowered himself to sit on a small chair in front of her so they were at eye level. "You don't owe me your trust," he said. "But if you ever want me to help you feel safe again, you can ask. And I'll be there." Her breath caught slightly. No one had ever offered her safety without asking for something in return. Not her tutors, not her advisors, not even her own court. She looked at him for a long moment, as if memorizing his sincerity. Then a sudden knock broke the silence. A guard entered quickly. "Princess, we've detected another ship approaching. Possibly the same attackers." Lyra stood up instantly, her calm replaced by royal determination. "Prepare the outpost security." The guard nodded and left, but before Lyra followed, she turned back to Orion. "Will you stand by me again?" she asked. "Always," he replied without hesitation. They moved together to the command hall. The outpost lights flashed red, and officers rushed to their stations. A large screen displayed the blurry outline of a ship approaching rapidly. "What do they want with you?" Orion asked, as he checked a weapon. Lyra hesitated. "There are factions in my empire who do not want peace with the Alliance. Some believe I am too merciful, too willing to listen to other worlds. My visit to Earth threatened their plans. They might be trying to remove me quietly before I reach the capital." Orion frowned. "They're willing to destroy a ship to stop you?" "Yes," she answered quietly. "They fear what my decisions could mean for the future." Lights blinked with growing urgency as the hostile ship locked onto the outpost's shields. Energy blasts began hitting the protective barrier, shaking the walls. "Shields dropping," an officer shouted. "Reinforce the east panels," Lyra ordered sharply, her royal authority emerging. As the attack intensified, an explosion shook the corridor outside. Dust fell from the ceiling. Orion grabbed Lyra's arm, guiding her away from falling debris. She didn't flinch this time. She trusted him without question. The lights dimmed as another blast struck the power core. Officers panicked, but Lyra remained calm. Orion admired her strength. Even in danger, suddenly, a large section of the wall cracked open. Metal fragments flew everywhere. A guard shielded the princess, but the impact threw him aside. Lyra stumbled backward, nearly falling again. Orion reached her instantly, catching her waist before she hit the ground. Their faces were close again. But this time, there was no panic. Only relief. "You again," she whispered breathlessly. "Looks like saving you is becoming a habit," he said with a small smile. Her eyes softened, truly softened. Without fear, but they had no time to linger. The attacking ship prepared to land troops. The outpost alarms grew louder. "We have to evacuate," Orion said. Lyra nodded, but not without stopping them first. They moved through the shaking hallways toward the escape wing. Guards fought the incoming attackers, but the enemy forces were stronger than expected. As they reached the final corridor, Lyra suddenly stumbled, her breathing fast. Orion turned quickly. "Are you hurt?" "No," she whispered. "It's just too much. Too fast." He stepped closer. "Look at me." She raised her eyes to him. "You're safe," he said slowly. "I'm here." And whoa, her breathing steadied. His voice grounded her. She didn't mind standing close to him now. The fear she once felt had turned into something warm, something she didn't yet have a name for. Before they reached the escape chamber, she spoke softly. "When this is over, I want to understand why your presence calms my heart. Then I'll stay as long as you need," he answered. She held his gaze for a long moment before finally nodding. Together, they stepped forward, ready to face the danger waiting outside. And deep inside her chest, the princess realized something terrifying and beautiful. The human's touch hadn't just saved her body, it had begun to save her soul. The hallway leading to the escape chamber trembled under their feet as enemy forces landed outside the outpost. The walls flashed red with warning lights, and the metal floor vibrated from distant explosions. Lyra moved quickly beside Orion, her cloak torn at the edges and her normally calm breath turning uneven. But she did not seem weak. Instead, she carried herself with a steady determination that reminded Orion why she was a princess destined to lead an entire empire. Her guards formed a protective ring around her, but they were clearly outnumbered. Orion kept himself close without touching her, always standing slightly ahead, ready to shield her if needed. He kept scanning the halls, listening to every sound, his instincts active from years of combat. The enemy had reached the interior faster than expected. A sudden blast shattered a nearby door, sending metal fragments flying. One sharp piece rushed toward Lyra. Orion reacted instantly, stepping in front of her and shielding her with his arm. The fragment bounced off his armor, leaving him unharmed. But Lyra gasped softly, her eyes wide with fear, not for herself, but for him. "You could have been injured," she whispered as the dust settled. "That's better than you being injured," he replied calmly. Something shifted in her eyes, something warm and painful at the same time. She wanted to protest, to declare that she didn't need protecting, but the truth caught in her throat. She was relying on him again, more than she ever thought she could rely on anyone. Before she could say anything, a loud metallic crash echoed down the corridor. Enemy soldiers, tall, armored, and carrying pulse rifles, charged toward them. "Princess, stay back," a Valyri guard shouted, but the guards were quickly pushed aside by the attackers. Orion grabbed Lyra's hand without thinking and pulled her behind cover. She didn't freeze this time. She didn't call it an insult. She let him. Blaster fire streaked past them, lighting the hallway in bright flashes. Orion fired back, hitting two of the attackers with precise shots. Lyra watched him, amazed by his calm focus in the middle of chaos. "You fight differently than my people," she murmured. "Humans learn to adapt fast," he said, reloading. "Sometimes, too fast." More enemies pushed forward. The guards tried to hold the line, but their defensive formation was breaking. Orion realized they would be overwhelmed soon. He turned to Lyra. "We have to move. The escape chamber is only one corridor away. But my guards, I'll help them hold the line," he said. "But you must get to safety first. Your survival decides the future of your empire." She stared at him, torn between duty and the strange connection forming in her heart. "Come with me," she said quietly. "It won't matter if they capture you while I'm escorting you alone," Orion replied. "I need to help your guards push them back for at least a minute." Her throat tightened. "I won't leave you." "You're not leaving me," he said softly. "You're trusting me." Her eyes flickered. Trust. A word she never used lightly. A word she thought she might never give again. He touched her shoulder gently, not forcefully, not boldly, but softly enough that she could pull away if she wanted. She didn't move. "I'll find you in the escape chamber," he promised. She swallowed hard. "You must," she whispered. Her guards guided her down the hallway, and she followed them. But she kept looking back at Orion, until the moment he disappeared behind a corner to join the fight. The moment he left her sight, she felt a sharp ache in her chest. She tried to ignore it, tried to stay focused, but every sound of blaster fire behind her made her heart tremble. The escape chamber door finally came into view, but before she reached it, Lyra stopped suddenly. Her guards turned to her in confusion. "Princess?" one asked. Lyra pressed a hand over her heart, her voice fragile. "He promised he would come." "He will," the guard replied. But the explosions growing louder behind them filled her with fear she hadn't felt in years. The fear of losing someone she cared about. Someone who had shown her kindness, without wanting anything in return. Someone whose touch didn't hurt. Meanwhile, Orion fought through the corridor with her remaining guards. The enemy forces were skilled, but he had faced worse. He moved with precision, firing at exposed targets, taking cover when necessary, and guiding the guards into safer positions. One guard fell, and Orion pulled him behind cover, returning fire with a determined glare. Another explosion shook the hallway, and part of the ceiling collapsed, blocking the path behind him. "Damn," Orion muttered. He checked the remaining guards. "We're falling back to the princess." They ran together, dodging blasts. But as they neared the escape corridor, another group of enemy soldiers appeared from the side passage. "Ambush!" a guard yelled. Orion grabbed a fallen shield panel and held it in front of them as blaster shots rained down. The guards fought back, but they were still pinned. Orion knew they had only seconds. He pressed his back against the wall, took a deep breath, and sprinted forward, using the shield panel to absorb the shots. Sparks flew. His boots skidded on the metal floor. He reached the attackers, slammed the shield into them, and knocked two aside. The guards followed, finishing the fight. When the hallway finally fell silent, Orion dropped the shield and exhaled. "Let's move," he said. But when they reached the escape chamber, the door was half closed. Lyra stood there, refusing to go inside. Her eyes widened with pure relief the moment she saw him. She stepped forward quickly, almost running. But she stopped herself just in time. Out of habit, Orion smiled breathlessly. "Told you I'd come." She stared at him, her chest rising and falling, as if she had been holding her breath until this moment. "You kept your promise." He nodded gently. "Always." Her guards closed the door behind them, and the escape pod released from the outpost with a loud clank. Through the small window, they watched the outpost shrinking behind them as the attackers surrounded it. Lyra stepped closer to Orion, her voice low. "You risked your life again." "For me, I said I would," he replied simply. She looked down, her hands trembling slightly at her sides. "I do not understand why." "Because you deserve to be protected," Orion said. "Not because you're a princess. Because you're a person who has been hurt too much." Her breath caught at his words. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Everyone treated her like a symbol, a ruler, a duty. Not a person with feelings. The escape pod drifted through space silently, the engine humming softly. A dim blue light filled the interior. Lyra sat across from Orion, watching him with searching eyes. "You said earlier that I could ask you when I wanted to feel safe again," she said quietly. He nodded. "And that offer still stands." She hesitated before speaking again. "Then, may I sit beside you?" His eyes softened. "Of course." She moved slowly, carefully, like someone approaching something precious. When she sat beside him, she kept a small distance at first. But the silence felt heavy with emotion she didn't know how to express. Finally, she whispered, "Can I hold your hand?" Orion turned to her gently. He didn't reach for her first. He simply extended his hand slowly, giving her full control. She looked at his hand with fearful hope. For years, she believed touch was a threat, but his touch had saved her twice, calmed her heart, and made her feel something warm she never thought she could feel again. With a trembling breath, she placed her hand in his. It wasn't a regal gesture. It wasn't a diplomatic one. It was fragile, vulnerable, honest. The moment their palms touched, she closed her eyes, expecting the old fear to return. But it didn't. His hand was warm, steady, and gentle. Her shoulders relaxed, and her heart softened. Orion held her hand lightly, making sure she could pull away any time. She didn't. "It feels different," she whispered. "Better?" he asked. She nodded, her voice barely audible. "Safer," he smiled softly. "Then you're healing." She looked up at him with a mixture of surprise and emotion. "You think I can heal?" "I know you can," he said. "And I'll help you." Her eyes glowed with a warmth she never allowed herself before. A warmth she didn't know she was capable of feeling. In that small escape pod drifting through the quiet stars, she realized she was no longer afraid of touch, not his touch. She squeezed his hand slightly, and he squeezed back, careful and steady. For the first time in her life, the alien princess felt like she wasn't alone in the universe. And for Orion, holding her hand felt like a vow he intended to keep. The escape pod sailed quietly through the dark of space, far away from the burning outpost they had left behind. A single blue light filled the small cabin, soft enough that it made everything feel peaceful despite the danger. Princess Lyra still sat beside Orion, her hand resting gently in his. She had not let go, and Orion had not pushed her to. He simply supported her, letting her decide how close she wanted to be. Her silver hair glowed faintly in the dim light. She leaned back with slow breaths, her body tired but her heart strangely calm. She kept looking at their joined hands, as if trying to understand why it felt right instead of frightening. "I never imagined I could sit like this," she whispered softly, breaking the silence. "Like what?" Orion asked gently. "Beside someone. Touching someone. Without fear." Her voice trembled slightly. "I thought that part of me was broken forever." "You're not broken," he said. "You were hurt." "That's different." His words made her blink slowly. They felt warm, healing, almost like a truth she wanted to hold on to. Before she could respond, The pod's console beeped softly. Orion stood and checked the controls. "Good news," he said. "We're nearing a Valyri border point. Once we enter, your people will detect us and send an escort." Lyra nodded but didn't look happy. Instead, her eyes softened with something like sadness. "So, our time alone ends soon." Orion looked at her with quiet understanding. "You're worried?" She turned her head slightly. "I don't know how my people will react. Some will be angry that you touched me. Others will wonder why I allowed it." "Do you regret it?" Orion asked softly. Lyra looked straight into his eyes, and the fear in her expression washed away. "No," she said with gentle certainty. "Every time you touched my hand, you returned something I lost." Orion felt warmth settle in his chest at her words. He sat back beside her, close enough that she could feel comfort but not pressured. A soft hum filled the cabin as the pod neared the border. Lyra's hands rested in her lap now, but she leaned slightly toward him, as if she needed his presence to stay steady. For a long moment, they simply sat together, listening to the quiet. Suddenly the pod jolted slightly. A message flashed on the screen. "Valyri Border Patrol detected, identifying." A sharp beeping sound echoed through the cabin. Lyra stood carefully, her expression shifting from soft vulnerability to calm royal control. "They will scan for identity codes," she said. "Once they confirm I'm alive, they will send a rescue ship." "Are they friendly?" Orion asked with a raised brow. "They're loyal to the Empire," she answered. "Which means their loyalty is to me." "But," Orion asked, hearing the hesitation in her voice. "But they won't understand you," she admitted quietly. "They will question why a human was with me. They will not know what we went through." Orion nodded slowly. "That's all right. I can handle questions." Lyra stepped closer. "You don't know Valyri pride. They might treat you like a threat. Some may even demand that I distance myself from you." "Do you want to?" Orion asked softly. Her breath caught in her chest. "No," she whispered. "I don't." Before she could say more, the entire pod filled with bright blue light. A large Valyri cruiser hovered outside, locking the pod in a tractor beam. Lyra watched silently as the humans inside the pod looked small compared to the giant alien ship. "They're bringing us in," she said softly. Orion stood beside her as the pod docked with the cruiser. A hiss of pressurized air announced the opening door. Lyra felt a sudden tension inside her chest, fear. Not for herself, but for what might happen to him. Several tall Valyri guards waited outside. Their armor glowed softly, and their long silver hair moved like liquid light. They bowed deeply upon seeing the princess. "Your Highness," one of the captains said urgently, "we feared the worst. Are you injured?" "I am safe," she said calmly. Thanks to him, the guards turned sharply to Orion, their eyes narrowing. He stood straight, but respectful, his hands visible and empty. The captain stepped forward. "Human, you will explain why you were in physical contact with the royal." Lyra raised her hand sharply. The captain froze. "No one questions his presence," she said with a rare firmness. "He saved my life, twice. Without him, I would not be standing here." The guards exchanged stunned glances. Lyra never defended anyone so strongly. Orion bowed slightly. "I only did what anyone should do." "No," Lyra whispered quietly beside him. "Not anyone." She stepped forward, closer to him than any guard expected. The chamber fell silent. Everyone stared, as the princess stood only inches away from the human. "I wish him to accompany me to the capital," she said. The captain blinked in shock. "Your Highness, he is not of our race. The court may object." "Let them," she replied softly but firmly. Orion looked at her with surprised warmth. "Are you sure?" "I want you with me," she said quietly, only for him to hear. The captain bowed reluctantly. "As you command." They escorted her to a private chamber aboard the cruiser, large, bright, filled with soft lights and shimmering furniture. Lyra moved toward a circular window, watching distant stars drift by. Orion stood behind her, unsure how close he should be. "Come closer," she said softly, not turning around. Orion stepped beside her. She looked at his reflection in the window's glass. "When we arrive at the capital," she said, "everything will change. My father will want answers. The council will question me. Some will judge you. Some will try to push you away." He nodded. "And what do you want?" She turned fully toward him, the lights reflecting gently in her violet eyes. "I want to choose safety where I feel it, comfort where I find it. And right now, that is with you." Orion felt breath leave his chest for a moment. He looked at her with steady warmth. "Then I'll stay." Lyra exhaled shakily, as if releasing a fear she held for years. Slowly, she reached out her hand. She didn't hesitate this time. She placed her fingers gently on his arm, feeling the warmth of him through the fabric. "This fear inside me," she whispered. "It is not as strong when you are near." "I'm not letting anything hurt you again," he said softly. She held his arm a little tighter, her voice fragile but full of new strength. "You already healed the part of me I thought was gone forever." Before Orion could speak, the ship's voice echoed. "Arriving at Valyri capital. Prepare for docking." Lyra's heartbeat quickened. She straightened her posture, becoming the princess her people needed. But when she looked at Orion, her expression softened again. "You must stay beside me," she said quietly. "No matter what they say." "I will," he promised. The cruiser descended into the glowing city of the Valyri Empire, a place of crystal towers, floating platforms, and rivers of light. As they stepped out onto the royal landing bridge, dozens of nobles stared, confused and startled, at the sight of a human walking beside the princess. Lyra didn't hide their closeness. She didn't step away. When her father, the emperor, approached with shock in his eyes, Lyra spoke first. "Father," she said softly, "the human saved my life, and saved something even more precious." The emperor looked between them, confused. "And what could a human have saved from you, my daughter?" Lyra reached for Orion's hand. Gently, fearlessly. "My soul," she whispered. Gasps echoed through the entire bridge, and the human she once accused of insulting her now stood as the only one her heart trusted.